You know, for a lot of reasons, I've kind of been dragging my feet on this one, but I think we should finally talk about the Gustav Karl a little bit. What's going on, everybody? Gustav the 13th here with a look at the latest banner drop suit as of this week of early December. It is the Gustav Karl. Big, chunky motherfucker that it is. So, this is a general with ground compatibility, 2 priority, can be put in space 2. And in general is pretty much, at least on the surface, easy to just kind of call like a thick, like Jagan in terms of its abilities. And once we get down to business, you'll probably have a better idea as to why. So let's look at its weapons first and foremost here. So one point of allure for this thing early on actually was the fact that this is another suit, or at least a suit that actually comes pre-equipped with the only main gun that it has as the Jagan D-type bazooka. This is kind of a coveted weapon. Things that use it tend to be able to stack a little bit more range stuff on it in order to make the priority, or not the priority, but the damage on this pretty hellacious. Definitely a favored weapon. Although, as we go down the stats, you'll come to see why that's not really quite the case for this one. It has its own Beam Saber 2800 with a cooldown of 2.5. Vulcan guns, which actually aren't too bad. Decent fire rate, power of 120, ammo of 60, a range of 150, and a reload time of 9 seconds. It says that it has its own beam. It's the Gustav Karl beam rifle as a subgun. Another instant stun, no dealy. 5 shots, but let's be honest, it's just like an old Jagan rifle or some shit. Armed grenade launcher, another 2-shotter for some stun build up here. 1100 for the power, ammo of 2, range of 300, and the reload is 10 seconds. And then we have the club enhanced because, you know, we're never going to be done away with this thing. Although the interesting thing about this one, because it is enhanced, I guess, it actually has a better ready up time. Not bad. Actually a more reliable quick stun, especially if you're in a situation where you need to favor your left side a little bit more, as they tend to come from that end. 2200 power, range of 200 meters, as well as a reload time of 18 seconds. So then, going down the list here for our stats is a 650 with 25,000 health right out of the gate. Very chalky in the health department. Ballistic resistance of 32, beam resistance of, well, 39. It says 40 because of the upgrade, but that's because when we got it, we actually got a dupe right out of the gate. So, we already have some upgrades on this thing. Melee resistance of 15, range strength of 13, and once again, another suit that has everything in the kitchen sink in terms of ranged weapons and sub-weapons, but not a lot of recourse in terms of output to actually make those go to work for it. Despite the fact that this could potentially, and I mean, to a certain degree regardless, is a pretty strong midliner. But, of course, you know, where it lacks in there, it does put more into melee strength, starting out at 33, movement speed of 120, top speed of 220, thruster gauge of 75, and turning speed of 66. So, surprisingly, despite it all, general movement on this thing, even though it is a big chalky motherfucker, not bad. Definitely can get where it needs to go, close gaps and things like that. The turning speed you may or may not want to add into, at least it's not some of the hellaciously lower things like going into even the lower 60s or even high 50s that some suits tend to rock. And then we go down to the parts slots here. Close range of 24, medium range of 15, and a long range of 9. Once again, if you're actually hoping to get some more out of your range, you're gonna be able to get to maybe like 30 or so by putting in some of the top things in terms of the range buffs. But really, with that close range, you're gonna probably be doing one of 2 things, because once we start looking at the skills, you're gonna be valuing whatever thrust you have, and also probably trying to make your downswings or your melee do as much as possible in certain situations. And this is something else we'll be talking about later on down the line too, in terms of building this thing. But going into skills, then we have Leg Shock Absorber level 3, Frontline Support System level 1, Anti-Blast Stabilizer level 1, High Performance Balancer, High Performance Radar level 2, High Performance Balancer level 1, Melee Combo Controller level 1, High Spec Ambac level 2, Maneuver Armor level 1, Force Injector level 2, Enhanced Tackle level 5, Active Guard level 3, Damage Control level 1, Special Left Shoulder Armor Buffer level 2, and of course, considering when you look at the profile of this thing, the legs are just absolutely massive, it gets, thankfully, Special Leg Buffer level 3, so 25% on that. Overall, it seems to have what it needs. I really can't deny that. The Active Guard level 3 is kind of interesting. I don't know if we have other suits that have Active Guard to that degree. And I kind of wish when we get into certain things later that it would actually mitigate some of the thrust bleed when it comes to using it as well. But the interesting thing here being, of course, that since you do have Balancer on top of the Active Guard, you can kind of just bounce your way into it while you're on the ground, so it's a little bit more reactive while you're on the move. Definitely if you do get caught unawares and get hit with some stuns and stuff, it gets nasty very quickly. The fact that you can't really roll out of things, and the fact that even though you're not necessarily super slow, you're also not very fast compared to other things at that cost, especially when we're talking about 650. And this is where we get into something that's a little bit rough, because this is 650. Even at the best of time, has a hard time getting away with certain things just because there's so many transformables, there's so much range barf going on at that cost. All of that is amplified by 11 at 650, and heaven help either of those suits when we start talking about any kind of 700 variants. Although at the very least, at that cost, even though there is some high output range, most of them are doing it to actually get into some very hellacious bunga. This thing in particular is definitely something that people have been calling a bit of a team suit, which is a very nice way of saying that it really is not very self-reliant. Even though it can take a lot of punishment, it has a really hard time making you feel like you're doing a lot of output unless you really try to gear it towards making really dummy thick downswings with its melee. Because for the most part, it kind of feels like you're just shooting nerf darts at things. Yes, those nerf darts are getting stuns in for other people to hopefully follow up, or for you to maybe get in there with a quick downswing so that you can at least get some extra damage and piece the fuck out. But committing that long with a suit that doesn't necessarily have a roller or immediate out without you having to be like super reactive with your Active Guard means that for all that health pool you have, you're also going to get whittled through it very quickly in certain situations, and that's kind of my gripe with this. I've been doing my damnness to try to figure out some certain situations and areas where I can actually find some favor in this suit. More often than not, I'm usually not afraid to talk about suits that are just kind of so-so or whatever, but this one in particular is another one of those suits where I'm sure there's going to be a very big rift, and people who are like, it's kind of meh, kind of shitty, and then the super cracked people that are like, no bro, it's just skill issue, blah blah, and they get super hard about it. But that being said, if it's utility for you and if you can actually make this thing work, I don't think we're going to be seeing the end of this thing. But outside of that, let's try to take this over into practice so that you can see a little bit of this in action, and we'll put it up against different typings and stuff in the usual impact site situation. Alrighty. So, let's take a bit of a gander here at what's going on with this suit. Is it just me, or is it actually starting to cycle through more of the music in these? So in general, without anything on it, it's doing some decent output with the downswings here, depending on where you're hitting, and the thing to keep in mind is that just like how you have a bunch of body buffers, so do these guys. It's doing alright. I will say one thing for sure right now, especially with how things are going in general meta and with the kind of parts that people have, bulk is definitely still in. The kind of results that you're seeing on some of these suits, especially some of these older, a bit more fragile suits, aren't really always going to be indicative, which is why I try to put in those fights from just actual live rated stuff. But if you're talking about some stuff that's just generally at your cost, not bad. The grenade launcher, of course, depending on whether or not they have damage control, of course, can still stun in 2. The Vulcans, in fact, we might just bully this guy for a little bit to get those out. A little bit around half for that, since you do have 60 shots, which means that you can, I think, potentially, yeah, get 2 shots out of an entire head. Just noggin worth of bullets. Not too bad output on the rifle. Now, And let me emphasize, that's some decent fucking ready up for that club, so you'll be able to actually rely on that, maybe even for your opening stun if you think you can finagle it, and then just move on to something else. Honestly though, compared to even the bazooka, this one's a little bit slower, so you might as well just go into this, maybe even just, you know, skip that unless you absolutely need it between that and the rifle. But not bad overall. Definitely able to get some finishers in there, at least on things that you have type advantage against. The bigger thing, and the thing that I've been finding, is that when you have these really high resistance things, you're running up against like Delta Kais, funny enough, even other Gustav Karls, or just things that had that kind of similar bulk, you start to very quickly feel like you're just hitting shit with Nerf bullets and pool noodles. Which is interesting because in some cases, two things tend to happen when you also go up against other people. As you might see in some of this later footage in one of the matches they're going to put up. One of two things happens. Either it's a single person going up against you, they try to do their damage, they're just going through the motions, or they notice how much damage they're not doing to you, and they just kind of look like, man, well, he's on the floor, I guess, time to fuck off, and they just kind of leave you alone for somebody else. The other thing that happens, though, is that once people kind of realize, especially with how vulnerable you can be to being stun looped if you're not really good on your active guards and stuff, is that they'll just sit there and ping pong your ass for a hot minute. Actually, I'm gonna try to ask a certain somebody if I can borrow something real quick, but if so, then the example will probably be around here or so. If not, I'll just cut this part up.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Fight back, nigga! Fight back, nigga! Fight back! Fight back!
But outside of that, definitely doable. The one thing that kind of bothers me, and I understand, I get it, right? Because look at this fucking thing, it's massive. It's so damn big. But one thing that I definitely miss, especially when we're talking about comparisons with suits like the Jesta and whatnot, Jesta, on top of having, I think, glide structure, also has fucking flight control. This big chunk of metal does not have that. Rightfully so, of course, but it also does mean that you have certain vulnerabilities when you're like dropping from places. Maps with verticality mean that you always really kind of have to watch your ass, or just hope that when you force yourself down that you're not immediately going to get caught out. In fact, toward that degree. Ugh. So you can at least get that out very quickly, but depending on how much thrust you have on this, that could be a matter of only seconds, which may mean one or two shots get blown before they cycle to something else and just stun you while you don't have any boost. This is a very boost-thirsty suit, because if you're not actively trying to duck and dodge in a big-ass suit, you're also trying to block, and hopefully not realizing too late that you just kind of wedged yourself in a spot where no one's really going to try to come for you, right? On your team, you're just not going to get any of that backup, and so you just kind of blew that for nothing. You could say that that's just a team play problem, a general, like, just pubs problem or whatever, but, like, it's a problem that the suit kind of makes for itself because of its kit and the way that it has to work on certain things. Of course, once again, because it doesn't really have super crazy output in terms of the actual range itself, some of this is doing okay, other things not so much. But as long as you can kind of keep yourself on the move and maybe just do this, it's doing better than some of the other suits that we've had and have talked about on these segments in a little while. Like, look at that, it's actually getting some good progress on it. Keep in mind, of course, that this is a naked Gustav Karl. There's nothing on it, which means technically if you were to put on maybe a little bit more for range, or if you had an off part that you could put on some more, it might do this a little bit faster. I don't know if there would be anyone who would do a heavy, like, maybe reloader stuff. Everything on this, from what I can see, is just ammo based, so you could just do, like, physical reloaders just to try to cycle and get through more of this, although to be honest, your big bread and butter is going to be from giving your big slappies. But if you can get through these faster and just kind of keep your gradual advance towards things, you know, steady, then, you know, all the more power to you, right? Because not only is that good for you, but that's good for people around you. So once again, going into that whole team play suit thing, this is definitely not a suit that you want to be trying to dive in with, or not necessarily a suit that can get away with cheekier stuff while just kind of being entrenched. It'll get entrenched on its own just due to the nature of the suit and the fact that you're probably going to have to front line a little bit with this, just because even though it does have a decent range on most of its stuff, keeping it in range for consistently, especially against other high output suits, means having to put more pressure on them so that they're not, you know, keeping you at an arm's length. And, or by this meaning, I mean like a fucking football field's length away. Because you have some reach, but not that much reach, especially compared to other things at this cost. It just kind of is what it is, being a grunt suit and whatever. But overall, not too bad. It seems like an actual general suit, just in terms that it can actually do a little bit of everything. It can have some decent output for base busting. It can actually do some good output on other suits. You just have to really beware of your average, like, bulk builds and things, because it can turn into just doing decent damage with everything to just feeling like you're hitting, like, you know, like a blast door or something, and it's just like doing nothing, and you're just like, well, I can stun loop them. I may get in trouble if I stay too long, and you're really gonna have to make some judgment calls once you make that realization. It's definitely gonna be a toss-up every time, which is a little unfortunate, but that's just kind of the nature of the game, in the way that we have our parts kind of just done up with certain suits having really high resistances in places, especially as we have some higher rarity or just more advanced suits in this cost range. But if you just want something else to work with, if you're tired of your Toad Zitters or whatever else you've been running at this cost, definitely not the worst thing ever to use. Definitely a lot of kit. I feel like people who are used to other suits, like the Jester or maybe even the Sare, are probably just going to feel at home with this thing anyway, so it's probably not even that much of a question to them. It's just a question of what exactly they're going to run on it when they do run it. And in fact, as of this recording, unfortunately, GS3 didn't have enough people to do the clans for 650, but for anyone who did participate over the weekend, let us know how many of these you actually saw during clans, because it does seem like it would be a good something to mix in there with it, just because of the way that it can carry itself in certain situations. But speaking of some combat here, we are going to show off one of our runs. I'll be honest with you guys, I had a really hard time trying to get a run that I felt kind of decent about. This has been a suit that I've been kind of back and forth about. That whole thing about the 3 different depictions of just kind of like meh to shitty to just, you know, super cracked, can't believe. Well, one of those was a certain someone in my ear, you know, singing the praises of this suit while I was just trying to get from it's kind of you know, kind of shit to just, you know, at least mad or feeling okay about it. And this match is probably going to be the result of that. So we'll put that around into the video about here.
Time to sortie, team. Take care out there. Here we go! Commence operation!
Wait, what the fuck? Did I actually get through that? Probably not. Missed anyway. Oop.
This damage shouldn't affect you.
Oh,
Your ally's been knocked out! I'm picking up an SOS from an enemy mobile suit destroyed!
oh no.
An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit! We captured a beacon! The enemy's captured a beacon! We've taken some serious damage! Whoa, your mobile suit isn't looking good! Ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit! Your ally's been knocked out! Oh no! The mobile suit is at it! Pick where and... Good luck! Supporting fire's been set up. Pull out of the hot zone.
Mm-hmm.
Long-range supporting fire's coming in hot. Fire is over. Ugh, an ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit.
Oh, oh shit. That's dumb.
An ally has destroyed an enemy mobile suit.
Feel a little bad for that knockdown, but still.
Fire incoming. Looks like we're ahead for now. Your ally's been knocked out.
Huh. That's pretty cool. You got boo-boos? You got boo-boos.
Your unit's all repaired.
Oh, nice and fixed. Okay. Oh shit. Fuck you. Go away. Be not in that spot anymore. Oh, actually, yeah, you might as well see what you got. I need you. I mean, that means he's gonna not play no more for today, right? my thing is that, like, regardless of ability, sometimes you just gotta know and then just call it for the day if that's really gonna be your goal. That's kind of why I'm glad that I had this on my alt account, because I can fuck this as much as I want. I don't really care at this point, as long as it's not Gus. Gus is hanging around the same spot, still in the rough matches here and there, but still staying in A+. The bigger thing is that I need to get it back more solidly into A for fucking space, because I think it was during one of the limited mission runs a while back at this point. I tanked it really bad. It felt alright. There's some neat moments in here, but I don't really think I did a whole crazy amount in this one. I don't know if they're gonna come here or not. Ooh, that's like a hate out. Hate. You leave me alone. Oh, cease that. It's foolishness. Oh, yes.
Yeah, we won! Here are this battle's rewards.
Funny joke. And that was our run in the Gustav Karl. Overall, yeah, definitely a neat suit. I'm very, very, very curious to see where this suit ends up towards the end of this coming week. Whether or not we do see it, or if maybe something else in the 650 range drops that kind of not necessarily trivializes the suit, but just kind of brings attention away from it, and so we only have like the people who are like dedicated to it left. I already have a feeling, just because of how nasty some of these bigger like Delta Chi heavy and like just Delta heavy builds we've been seeing in terms of like pub teams have been, that this thing might get left out in the cold after a while, just because that meta is not really gonna go away at 650. But who knows, right? Stranger things have happened. If you've seen the way that 700 has been progressing, even with and without the nerfs to the Banshee and Unicorn, it's definitely been a Wild West up there. It very well could be that in 650 after a certain point, depending on how unit changes and things happen. And if this thing actually does get early unit changes, it kind of makes me wonder what they would do to it. I gotta be honest, the only thing I really want is just a slight bump up to the ranged output. I'd be interested to see how much more that could give us in terms of this being a bit more of a competent midliner, with the way that resistance builds are at this cost. Because like I've been saying repeatedly, the way this is doing damage right here is not the way that this tends to do damage in general matches in rated, especially with the way people build their suits and the kind of suits that you're seeing out there. It is a very different ball game in live practice, which is kind of why I wish we could do certain tweaks and just like put different suits out here in the practice arenas so that we can get a better idea of what we can expect with other suits, because I feel like that's better data than just doing it specifically for what they think is okay at the time of them doing it for the cost and just kind of letting that rock. There are certain things that you can also do just because of the way body buffers are on this to get different ideas, but like there's only so much that this spread of suits can really teach you. And Trial by Fire is one of the better teachers, but it's also one of the more frustrating ones. So hopefully one day they'll let us do a little bit more adjusting when it comes to practice. But until then, hopefully you guys have been enjoying the Gustav Karl out there. If any of you come in the chat and start saying that this is my suit and all this other shit, I am going to lose my mind. It has already happened a bunch in the last couple streams. I am dying. Please send help. But also keep in mind that once this one's done, I am going to be doing another quick video for you guys to be looking out for, because I did actually get the Shikikai MP, and I do want to do a quick talk about that one as well. So until then, I hope you guys have a good rest of your morning, night, or whatever, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one.